Welcome to The Real Game, a podcast by coaches for coaches. I am your host, Matt Philbrick. Welcome back to this episode of The Real Game. I am your host, Matt Philbrick, and we're back here recording another episode this week. I have a special guest with me on today that I found, actually just kind of stumbled upon him as I was looking through Spotify one day. I'm always looking out for good basketball and coaching podcasts, and I came upon this one called Coaching Youth Hoops that I've been enjoying. I've listened to multiple episodes, and as a basketball coach, it's all real applicable and relevant things to myself. So it kind of piqued my interest. So I reached out to one of the guys on the podcast. His name is Coach Collins, Steve Collins. He's with me today. Good to have you here today, Coach. In just a couple minutes, I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your coaching journey and how you've kind of gotten to where you are today. But Coach, you have a ton of coaching experience. I looked through your webpage a little bit. You have a website called teachhoops.com. You have a Facebook page, multiple podcasts. You've been doing this for a long time. You are in the state of Wisconsin. I know we chatted briefly about my brief experiences there. But anyways, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on here. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how you arrived at this point in your life.
That's more than 40 minutes right there.
I know. Yeah, that's a tough one.
So I've always loved coaching. I had great coaches kind of growing up, a lot of different mentors. So something I think I'm fifth generation teacher. Okay. And the coaching teaching thing just seemed to be hand in hand. I'm a math teacher, teach statistics. I'm married to a psychologist, so every coach should be married to a psychologist. Let me tell you. But anyway, I think I'm approaching year 35, 36, 37 on coaching. And just, taught Northern Wisconsin, Wausau. We didn't talk about that beforehand for 7 years. Did a lot of hunting and fishing early in my bachelor days, and then moved to Madison and really wasn't looking for a head job, but ended up kind of falling into one. The head coach became the principal. I got the job. I was just telling somebody yesterday, October, and the season started in November. So to talk about being thrown in the deep end. Yeah. And then from there, I've just been, really blessed with great two staffs. I've had two staffs in 30 years, which is, as a coach, is wonderful because you build a camaraderie with that. And then, in 2017, 2016, 2017, was looking for, my exit plan per se. How could I get back to the game that's given me so much? And that's where my podcast came. I have 7 podcasts, actually, if you believe that. I don't know
how you keep up with all those.
I don't. It's trust me. I'm partly a vampire. Coach Unplugged, high school hoops, coaching youth hoops, the 5-minute basketball podcast, and then a couple specific ones, my funnel down defense and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so started doing YouTube and started doing those kind of things. So I wanted to get back. So I think podcasts are when you go into someone's ear, you get a connection with them. Definitely. There's something unique about podcasting. Started with YouTube, kind of pivoted into that. Have a Facebook group that has like 120,000 people in it. So I'm trying to be as many places as I can to just give back to this game. And then that's where my teachhoops.com and coachingyouthhoops.com, I started that with Bill. They're different. One's more for a high school. Coaching Youth Hoops is, we didn't think there was a lot out there for youth basketball coaches. There aren't. With practice plans, with how to deal with parents. Just did a course on, all the administrative stuff as a youth coach. What do you have to do administratively? And that's where this kind of all came about. So it's been great. And, I'm probably a couple handful of years away from retirement. And then I can do this. I can go fishing in the morning. I can do this in the afternoon. It'll be good.
I love the little wooden sign you have on the shelf behind you. Yeah. My basketball coach in college actually had a magnet on his fridge that basically said the same thing. We interrupt this marriage to bring you basketball season, which for most coaches is like a year-round thing now. It's not even basketball season anymore.
I stole that from my brother, actually. Yeah. It was he coached his daughter when she's got to be 26, 27 when she's coming up. And I actually stole it out of his house. So his wife said, take this.
I won't tell him. Well, listen, Coach, because of time, I want to jump right into the topic today. So it feels like you see more and more on the news and things like that, where you have parents that are getting more and more involved in, fighting with coaches, fighting with officials. Sometimes it's verbal. Sometimes it gets physical. Unfortunately, it's all unfortunate, but it seems like it's becoming more and more commonplace. If you've done any coaching at all, you've had interactions with parents. And let me just say this as a disclaimer before we even start. Most of my experience with parents, 95% has been fine. It's been great. Like, I've had supportive parents. I've had, good parents that are on board. They support me. They support their players. They let me do what I'm doing, and they kind of stay in their lane, right? Everybody has their roles. Right. Coaches coach, officials officiate, parents cheer your
triangle.
Cheer your players on and stay in your lane, okay? But there's always, I guess, the 5% that doesn't. And I'm just making that statistic up. I don't really know if that's 5%, 10%.
I mean, I would, for my career, I think it's like 97%. 90,
probably.
Yeah, it's hard. I think one of my high school coaches told me early in my coaching career, it says, it's hard to be rational with an irrational person.
Sure. Yeah.
And parents aren't rational. I'm not rational. I mean,
when it comes to your kids, right?
One of the hardest things I've told people this, one of the best things I've ever done, and one of the hardest things I've ever done, was to coach my son.
Mm-hmm.
It was the most joyous thing I've ever done in my life. And it was also the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
Because you have these two little people talking, one's parent, one's coach.
Yes.
And they conflict at times. And
absolutely.
Going back to what I said, I had a great staff who at times would say you're being too hard, or you're not being hard enough, or why aren't you playing, blah, blah, blah. So it was great. And him and I still joke about it. He still thinks I messed up multiple times and didn't play him in specific games and whatever. But
and maybe we did, right? Who knows?
And maybe I did. Yeah. I probably did, because I was probably the other way. So it's hard. Yeah. It's really hard as a parent. And because most parents will eat their kid before they let anything happen to them.
Absolutely.
And they're trying to protect them, so they're not being rational.
And I get it. Like, I've coached. I did an episode where I had my kids on the show, and one of my oldest son I coached, and my youngest is my daughter. I coached both of them, and I had them kind of recount their experience a little bit to me. My son's experience apparently was great, and he loved it. My daughter's, unbeknown to me, wasn't that great. She didn't really enjoy having me as a coach, because she thought I was too hard on her,
Right.
And so there's that. There's always that line as a parent coach that you're trying to balance.
It is. And we made a rule too, for anybody that's out there that's listening as a parent coach. The rule started as soon as we got in the car, as soon as we got home, we stopped talking about basketball unless he brought it up. Then it got to the car, because I was driving him. He's a freshman or something. I'm driving him home. He goes, that ain't going to work. As soon as we walk out of the building, it's done.
Yeah.
And that helped. That helped a lot, because it was dad. I became dad then, not coach. It was always coach.
And that seems like a good rule to have, so that you can kind of maintain, coach when you need to be and dad when you need to be. So, well, let me jump right into some questions here for you, Coach. We've kind of talked about some of this already, but what are some common challenges that coaches might face, but are going to face with parents? What are some common hurdles that we, might need to get over as coaches when it comes to dealing with parents?
There's lots of hurdles.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't think most of the time it's out of love. That the reaction of the parent is usually out of love. Sometimes it's out of being a little bit crazy, but usually it's out of love. I think the obstacles are that they're not watching. And again, this going back to what I just said, they're watching their son or daughter play, but they're not watching all the sons and daughters play. And I think that's a hard obstacle to get over as a parent and watching it was hard when I was coaching my son, not to watch
Sure.
him, not to watch the team, not to watch the game. So
And
I think
how hard is it as a coach to watch your kid playing for another coach? That's hard, right? Like
and to keep your mouth shut is even harder, I think.
Yep. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, but it's true. I think that's a difficult thing. And I think the underlying thing, and we'll probably talk about this in multiple different ways, is, and this is from a teacher that's taught for a really long time, is near the end of his career, is and I do life lessons. I teach statistics every day. I do a life lesson, like stupid ones and important ones. Like, we did a huge one about, your first check, put money into a Roth IRA. Second one is, clip your toenails after the shower. And then I
was going to say, those are important things. I was thinking like don't eat yellow snow, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's stuff like that, but they're all life lessons. They go, what do you mean? I said, because your toenails are soft after the shower. That's when you should clip. They look at me like I'm from Mars. Anyway, so I talk about all those things, but I also talk about one of my life lessons is communication. And I think that there's multiple triangles going on in basketball. Again, math teacher, but the biggest one is the player, parent, coach triangle, and the communication doesn't always flow universally through that triangle. And I think it's important too. And I'll tell a 30-second story about why this is important. Is my son on my team, sophomore year, going into his junior year, I have meetings. I have post meetings with all my players. And I have my assistant coaches in there because I never have meetings alone because I want other adult ears to hear what I'm saying. I had 3 other coaches in that meeting and myself with my son. Talked about what he would need to do to play for me his junior year, which was going to be hard. It was going to be hard. Senior year he started, but junior year was going to be hard. And all the things that he was going to have to do. And one of them was maybe not play AAU basketball, but work on your skill set and get stronger. And told him all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And meeting went well and da-da-da. And he goes home. I walk in the door. My wife lays into me because he went home and said, Dad said I won't play next year.
Oh, no. That's what he heard, right?
And that's what he heard. And that's not what I said. So that is the disconnect of the telephone game and the communication game. That's important. And that's why it's important when you have meetings to try to have all the parties together. Because I think that can deal with a lot of it. Deep down, usually the kids know. Not always. I've had more than a handful that think they should have been first team all state and I cut them. Like there's always those. But for the most part, when most of the kids look in the mirror, they know they are not the third best player on the team. They know they're 6, 7, 8. Parents maybe not. But I think that communication is super important. With breaking some of that stuff down. I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. And you bring up an excellent point. Communication is so important. And I feel like we'll talk about that throughout the episode. But I feel like a lot of that, and you mentioned having that communication with people present in person. In the age of technology that we're in with texting and email and all that stuff, you can use that stuff. Like that's fine. You use it to your advantage, but so much emotion gets lost in translation when you're dealing with emails and texts. Like you can say something in an email and that person can take it completely the wrong way because they don't hear the tone. They don't hear the emotion behind it, So doing that in person, like you mentioned, it's crucial, I believe. So good point.
And having those communications. So something I do in my program, and this is probably going to lead to another question later on, but every Sunday I send out communication about what's happening. I mean, you can't over communicate with parents. You can't going back to the life lessons. Communication deals with 97% of all problems. It really does. It's that they don't know that practice is Saturday. It's been changed, or that's where your issues as a coach come up. Is yes, you're going to have parents that are upset about playing time and blah blah blah, and you're not running the right offense and stuff. But most of the time, when they circle the wagons, it's because of other things.
No, you're absolutely right.
Being real. You're not
Yeah.
communicating. You're not doing, the buses aren't showing up. It's the other stuff is that's where they tend to get.
No, you're absolutely right. And for any young coaches that are maybe just starting and experience some of this stuff, Coach Collins is absolutely right that most of that stuff comes from they just want to know what's going on, and when they don't, their hairs bristle a little bit.
Right, and here's the problem with young coaches. They haven't had teenage kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, listen to the old guys that they don't talk to you. Like, my daughter was connected at my hip when she was younger, and now it's like at halftime I don't even know where she is.
Right. Yeah.
Like, because they're growing up. They're flapping their wings, and they don't necessarily want to sit and talk to mom and dad, and they don't tell them that old thing of like, how did school go today? Great. Like, how's practice? Good. That's what happens.
Answers. Yeah.
Yeah. For the most part. You get food in them. Sometimes it helps, especially with my son.
Food is like, it's like drink, sometimes it can open up the communication channels a little bit as information flows a little freer. So next question, how important is it for coaches to set clear expectations and boundaries with parents? Maybe, I don't know how you do it, at the beginning of the year, whether you have a meeting with them or setting expectations, what you as a coach expect from the parents, what's okay. And on the flip side, what's not okay for them to do as parents.
Yeah, I have always done that. I have an early parent meeting, and last couple of years they've been virtual, but I think that's really important to set how things are going to happen.
Yeah,
because I think that we have PCN, which is Parent Communication Network. We call it PCN. And we have a PCN meeting early in the year. Probably, I make cuts on Wednesday or Tuesday.
Okay.
And by Wednesday or Thursday, I got my parent meeting. Boom. Here we go. As soon as I make cuts, here's when the parent meeting is. Yeah. And I think it's important to tell the parents how things are going to work, how your communication is going to work with them and the athlete. But more important is when things happen. This is my big issue. When things happen, I got the ACT on Saturday. Well, fine. That's great. I want you to go it. But you need to tell me, the ACT date hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Right? Give me time. I will make it work so you can go and you don't miss anything too.
Sure.
Like I can change practice. There's things I can do, but I can't do anything when you tell me the night before.
Yeah, correct.
So what I tell the parents is, here's how things should work. Your athlete should communicate with me first. That should be if it's playing time, if it's grandma's birthday part, whatever it is.
Right.
That's what we have to do, because that's a life skill. I want to teach them that life skill.
Yep.
I said the second step is you and them together come talk to me. Yep. Because I have very rarely gotten past step 2. Because after player and parents, then it's player, parent, maybe athletic director, parent, player, principal, whatever. I very rarely gotten to steps 3 or 4. Like, it doesn't happen. Yeah. Usually, not like you said earlier, 97% of problems are dealt with step 1. The athlete and the play and hey, we'll make it work. Yep. Sorry, you got baseball and you want to go do. Okay, so we got practice at 8. What time does that start? So it teaches them that life skill that you want them to have.
Correct.
So I walked through that with the parents. I said, here's how I want things to work. And don't call me Saturday at 6:00. Like, it's not going to work that way. Like, that's not the way it's going to work when they go to college next year. They're going to be a college athlete, or they're going to have problems with their professors.
Or in a career. It's not going to work that way in a career.
I just know with my son, and hopefully my daughter has done better, because she's a COVID. I call her a COVID kid.
Yeah.
But my son is like, that was the first. I remember in 6th grade, he had a problem with a writing thing. Walked out to the car, was complaining about it. I literally sent him back to his elementary school. It was 5th grade, and said, "Go talk to the teacher." It was the best thing I ever did, because he found out it was not scary. It's like, hey, what did I do wrong? Blah blah blah. Teacher, it's a 5th grader. A 5th grader does that. A 5th grade teacher is going to be like, "I'm here. I'm gonna help you." It felt good, and then it's like, and he still does it. He's off at school this summer and was at office hours and stuff. So Yeah, you're right. I think, and even with employment, I think that's important.
Yeah. Let me get off just on a quick rabbit trail, although it may not be a real, long rabbit trail, because I think it's pertinent to what we're talking about. A couple minutes ago, you mentioned cuts. And as coaches, we all have to make cuts occasionally. How do you handle that? I know how I do it. I'm curious as to how you do it. And specifically, when you cut a kid, and I think it depends on the age of the kids as well. Like maybe elementary, middle school is different. I'm dealing with high school kids. When you cut a kid, do you just have a meeting with the kid and the other coach, or do you bring parents into that as well?
Yeah. So the way I do cuts is, so we'll have tryouts until the end, and then I'll grab the coaches. We'll have our last meeting about it. And then, what I do is I have them I leave a coach in so again, this is for high school. I leave the coach in the gym with all the players, and I have him send out players with all their stuff. Yep. As soon as I'm done talking to them, I want them to go home.
Sure.
I don't want to go back in the gym. I don't want that issue or anything to happen. So, and then we, keep cut, kind of alternate them so they don't know because they know the best player in the team's not going to get cut.
Right. Yeah.
So we alternate, kind of figuring out how we're going to send them through. But it's me and the assistant coaches and the kid. I don't have parents involved. I have a 24, depending on the group, 48-hour rule where I won't talk to anybody about it for at least 24 hours. Usually, sometimes it's 48, depending on the group. Yeah. But I want them to, because rational heads are not going to happen that night.
Yeah. That gives them a chance to process a little bit. It gives them a chance
to process. It gives the kid a chance to process.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard for the parents because part of that is social too. This has been their social group.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the social group is taken away because their kid's not playing anymore.
Right.
There's lots of little different things that happen with that. But no, I don't have parents in that initial meeting. Because to be honest with you, that initial meeting, they don't tend to hear you much other than they didn't make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what they hear.
Right. Right.
They don't hear much more than that. And you have a wide range of emotions from sad to shocked to angry to like, you name it, I've seen it.
Yeah.
The worst day of the year. Horrible.
I agree. That's very similar to how I do it. I mean, I'm not saying that's the perfect way.
It's a coward. It is cowardly to post the names. It's cowardly.
Yeah, I agree.
And kids that have put themselves out and tried deserve to talk to you.
Sure, absolutely.
They've earned that right.
Yeah.
And the people that post cuts, I don't care. You're a coward, in my opinion. You shouldn't be coached.
I agree with that, and I also agree with your 24, 48-hour rule. If parents are going to have feedback, give them time to process that stuff and maybe to calm down a little bit before they come back at you. I've never had it. I have a couple coaches. I'm an athletic director at a small school. I have a couple coaches who feel kind of the opposite, like they need to meet with parents and students together or athletes together to make that decision. I disagree with that. I don't think anything good comes from that initial meeting right away.
No, and the problem is you get an angry parent and then the kid's not like, you want them to, this is their experience.
Right.
That's my theory. It's not a good one. But it's again, growth mindset. Sometimes you got to fail to succeed in life.
Yeah.
And, eventually LeBron James will not play basketball anymore.
Yeah.
Everyone hangs up their sneakers at some point. No, but I'm just saying, it's like, let's be real. Michael Jordan played for 13 and then he hung his shoes up.
Yeah, definitely.
No, it's like everything happens at some point. So, I don't see, I've never heard good experiences with parents and cuts ever. They are at cuts. No,
I agree. I have a meeting at the beginning of every sports season, and in that meeting, I just encourage parents and this is coming from me as the athletic director, not necessarily the coach. I encourage parents to let kids own their sport, let kids own that, let that be theirs. And parents need to just stay out of it and cheer their kids on. Be your kid's biggest cheerleader, but let them own what they're doing. Let them own the failures, let them own the successes. encourage them when they fail, applaud them when they succeed. Other than that, don't meddle and just kind of stay out of it and let that be a little microcosm of life that they can learn and grow from and enjoy, and let that be their own.
Part of being a parent, the hardest part is they're going to leave your nest, and you want them to leave the nest, and you want them to be independent. You want to like not worry about what they're doing on a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Like I've told this story. Eagles on the bottom of their nest put sharp rocks and sharp glass in the bottom of their nests. And they do that because the eaglets, when they get bigger, it forces them, they get heavier, it forces down and it gets uncomfortable. So guess what happens? They fly away.
Yeah.
Right? They leave the nest because it's not comfortable anymore. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it's the same
analogy.
Yeah. That's what you want to do as a coach. It's like they're pseudo parents. Yeah.
Well, another question. What advice do you have for coaches when it comes to handling a particularly difficult parent? And I don't know if you've ever had to do this or not. I'm just going to throw this out there. I've mentioned this on a couple other podcasts. Sometimes I've had really bad experiences with parents where I've tried to work things out. I've tried to navigate those troubled waters with them and do everything I felt like I could as a coach to make things work. And you get to the point where you just say, you know what, maybe your child isn't the best fit for this team if we can't make this work. How do you navigate that particularly difficult parent?
I think you're right. It goes back to what I said at the beginning. I don't think you'd be rational with an irrational person. And I think there's times when they're just not. And you're trying to build a team for the most part, unless you're a track coach or a golf coach or like you're doing an individual sport. So I've said that on maybe a couple occasions, like maybe this isn't the best fit.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, never from the third best player on your team. I'm just being real.
No,
like,
I get it. Yep.
Number 9 to 15 usually.
Yep.
So it's like I have never heard or seen this coming from number 1 or number 2 or number 3 player on your team. Like we all know who those guys or gals are.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, I've had those discussions, and again, I tell people the most important day for a team, building culture, is the day you pick the team, because maybe that number 12 and you're keeping 15, maybe 12 ain't supposed to be on your team. You throw that chili pepper into the soup, now the soup doesn't taste as good or something. One ingredient can mess it up.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I had another episode, hasn't aired yet, with a high level volleyball coach. And I asked him about his recruiting process. What does he look for in athletes when he's out recruiting? And basically his answer was, it's easy to tell what their skills are right away. Like you can tell in 5 minutes, you can evaluate, can they hit? Can they jump? All those things. But they look more for, how respectful are they? Are they a good student? How do they treat their parents? How do they interact with mom and dad? What are their grades like? Would you want to coach that kid? Would you want to play with that kid? And those are the kind of things you're talking about. I mean, when you go to these AAU tournaments in the summer for basketball, my mom, who's going to be 85, could pick out the best player in that gym right away.
And you probably pick out the best 10 players. But if you're a mid-major, well, how do you differentiate? Well, you got to look for skill set, but then you look for the X factors. How are they handling when they get pulled out? How are they handling their teammates? How are they handling the huddles? How are they dealing with their parents after all that stuff? They're watching it. I'm just telling you, they're watching all that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So to kind of wrap things up and summarize, time's flown by here today, but can you just, how important is good rapport with parents when it comes to building a successful team?
That's a difficult question, because you basically can have 2 avenues of thought. You can have build a relationship with the parents and go out and have the beer with them after the game, or you separate. Well, I
guess maybe it depends on what your priority and your philosophy is, right?
Yes. And I have always kind of kept my circle relatively small. And it was obviously a little different when my son was coming up, but still I kind of, because you're the one that has to make the final decision on playing time and those kind of things. I think that's a difficult, I think it's important to have a great rapport. I think it's important to know that the most important thing is that they need to know that you love their kid, like that you'll take care of their kid.
That's a great point. Yep.
And I think that's the biggest thing that, when we lost this year in the regional final, you could tell with the tears and the hugs that I get it. Teenage boys don't give a lot of hugs.
Yeah.
But when things are good or really bad, they tend to be very emotional. And you could feel that. The parents could feel that at the banquet. They could feel it at the end of the season because it was special. It was a special group. It was a special thing. And it's like, that's what you want. You want every year to be that, where they feel that connection with you.
Yeah. And good rapport doesn't mean best friends, right? Because you're going to have to make hard decisions for them, for their kids. So
yes. And you're gonna have to be honest, and you're going to have to be like, here's what can really happen. And here's what will happen. And, your son's oversized or undersized or not quick enough. And you sometimes have to have some of those courageous conversations, which are hard. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Coach, it's been good to have you on here today. We're almost out of time. You are super easy to talk to. I feel like you and I think a lot alike. Maybe that's what it is. But it's keep up the good work. I'm excited about listening to more of your podcasts. And now that I know you have 7 of them, I'll be looking all those up.
Good. You look all those up.
Subscribing to all of them. But thanks for being on today. I appreciate you and the investment that you're making in the lives of kids, and keep up a good work. All right.
Thank you. Yeah. And you're going to go over and leave a 5-star on Spotify and iTunes for me. All right. I'm going to do it. Thanks.
Have a good day.
All right. Bye-bye.
Today was a fun episode for me, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. I'm going to leave you today with a quote from John C. Maxwell. And the quote is this: good leadership isn't about advancing yourself. It's about advancing your team. So good luck, coaches, and coach on.